The office of ladies and gentlemen, too often we misread the signs of our own transformation. We feel the tremors of shifting seasons and immediately assume we are under attack. We encounter disruption and conclude we are being derailed. But allow me to submit to you today that change is not chaos. It is divine calibration. It is not an interruption of destiny. Come the offense of the very mechanism by which destiny is achieved. The uncomfortable truth is this: God does not usher you into promise through convenience. Become the offense of He ushers you in through divine disorientation, the kind that breaks your routine, dismantles your assumptions, and forces you to let go of everything familiar that no longer serves where He is taking you. You see, when a compass malfunctions, even a few degrees of deviation can send you off course. Calibration is required, not just to return to the path, but to ensure the integrity of the destination. In the same way, when your life begins to shift, when what used to work begins to fail, the offense of, when people who once stood with you now disappear, when doors that once opened easily now remain shut, it may not be the enemy at work. It may be divine calibration. God is not punishing you. He is realigning you. He is stripping you of what is excess and unnecessary. He is teaching you, sometimes painfully, to depend not on the visible, but on the invisible. To anchor yourself not in routine, but in revelation. Now, I must warn you, divine calibration does not come with an explanation. Heaven does not always send a memo. The offense of, and therein lies the test. For if your faith is only functional when the path is clear, then it is not faith. It is preference disguised as belief. But true faith steps forward even when the way is obscure, trusting that the one who began the good work is faithful to complete it. This is the paradox of change. It feels like breaking down, yet it is building up. It feels like confusion, yet it is clarity in disguise. And unless you develop the discernment to interpret divine movement, does not become the offense of, you will sabotage your own process because it does not resemble your expectation. There is a psychological resistance in all of us to disruption. We are creatures of habit. The human brain, designed to conserve energy, seeks predictability and pattern, but the spirit of man, created in the image of the ever-creative God, is designed for evolution. When your spirit cries out for growth, but your mind craves safety, conflict arises. This is why so many people miss the moment. Offense of, they pray for breakthrough, but flee at the first sign of breaking. They declare they want change, but then retreat when change demands surrender. They long for the promise, yet resist the process. Let me remind you of the caterpillar. Before it becomes a butterfly, it must go through the cocoon, a place of complete disintegration. Scientists will tell you that the caterpillar doesn't simply grow wings and keep crawling. No, it dissolves into liquid form, loses all recognition of its former self, and is reconstructed entirely. My friends, some of you are in the cocoon. The office of, you are not dying, you are dissolving into something greater. But if you panic in the process, you'll never fly. If you curse the cocoon, you'll never see the sky. I recall the words of the prophet Isaiah, behold, I am doing a new thing, now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? That question is not rhetorical, it is diagnostic. Do you perceive it? Can you see the hand of God even in the unraveling? Can you trust Him not just when the doors open, but when they close? Can you walk blindfolded and still believe He is leading you? That is the maturity of faith. Not just celebration when the promise comes, but submission when the process confuses you. Let me go deeper. Divine calibration often removes not only things, but people. It's the offense of, there are some individuals in your life who are assigned only to your past, not to your future. But because we confuse loyalty with destiny, we carry people longer than we should. And so, God intervenes. He allows the separation not to hurt you, but to protect your future. Because everyone cannot walk with you into the promise. Not every voice deserves access in the next dimension. Some were with you in Egypt, but they cannot cross into Canaan. When you start to lose things or people, don't always run to ask why. Instead, learn to ask, what is this making room for? And yes, sometimes divine calibration is painful because it touches our identity. the offense of. It dismantles the version of ourselves that we've learned to perform. We've built careers around personas, relationships around patterns, and self-worth around performance. When God is preparing you for promise, He does not just change your path, He changes you. He requires authenticity. He peels away the mask. He calls the real you, the one not defined by title, status, or applause, but by purpose. That shedding feels like loss, but it is liberation. So I say to yuck, stop fearing the shaking. The offense of the shaking is not always a sign of destruction. It can be a sign of construction. When a building is being retrofitted for greater strength, become the odds of the scaffolding must be shaken. When an instrument is being tuned for a new song, the strings must be tightened. The pain of the pull is the prelude to performance. The disruption you fear may be the delivery of your future. When change comes, do not retreat, do not complain, and do not confuse discomfort with danger. Discomfort is the currency of growth. Change is not the enemy, it is the evidence that God is still at work, because anything that remains stagnant begins to die. But where there's divine movement, there is divine life. Let the winds of change blow. Let the ground beneath you shift. Let the unfamiliar challenge you. For it is in that movement, that shaking, that recalibration, that your promise draws near. If the promise of God is certain, then why do so many never walk in it? Why do countless souls carry the prophecy but die in the wilderness? The answer, my friends, is not that God has failed. It is that man has refused to participate in his own transformation. You see, God may author the promise, but you must prepare to receive it. And preparation is not an event, it is a discipline. It is not a spiritual luxury, it is a spiritual responsibility. We have inherited a generation that has become spiritually passive, the offense of waiting for divine promise to descend like rain, but unwilling to till the soil of their own character. We fast and we pray, and indeed, these are weapons. But we cannot fast our way out of responsibility. We cannot pray our way around preparation. Divine intention requires human alignment. God will never do for you what you are unwilling to steward for yourself. Look across the sacred text and you will find a consistent pattern. Divine promises always come with instructions. Before the flood, Noah was told to build. Before deliverance, Moses was told to confront. Before kingship, David was sent to tend sheep. And before resurrection, parents of Christ submitted to the agony of Gethsemane. In every instance, heaven issued a promise, but earth was required to respond with obedience. The offense of discipline and trust. You cannot claim the promise of Canaan while still carrying the appetite of Egypt. You cannot expect a new anointing while preserving old habits. You cannot step into destiny if you are addicted to delay. It is not enough to be called. You must be conditioned, and conditioning is not glamorous. It takes place in obscurity. It requires repetition, sacrifice, and sometimes pain. We romanticize the victory but ignore the discipline behind it. We quote verses about breakthrough, but we forget that even the walls of Jericho only fell after 6 days of walking in silence and obedience. The breakthrough was divine, the offense of, but the rhythm was human. Are you willing to keep walking even when there is no visible result? Are you willing to train in secret so that God can trust you in public? Become the offense of. There are too many who are emotionally attached to the promise, but mentally unprepared for its weight. We cry out, Lord, enlarge my territory, yet we lack the structure to manage the territory we already have. We beg for new platforms but remain unfaithful in hidden places. We seek greatness while ignoring the grind. But the principle remains, what you do not prepare for, you will mismanage when it comes. The promise will not adjust itself to your laziness. God's timing does not accommodate your lack of discipline. Either you rise to the level of the promise, or the promise will pass on to the next prepared vessel. I speak to those who are praying for elevation. Understand this. Elevation requires excavation. Before God builds up, He digs deep. He removes the fragile foundations of pride, insecurity, fear, and procrastination. That excavation can feel like rejection. It can feel like stagnation. but it is divine preparation. The offense of God will never place glory on a structure that cannot bear its weight. He will not pour fresh oil into a vessel that is unclean or unstable. The offense, or if you are being stretched, if you are being stripped, if you are being silenced, it may be the clearest evidence that you are being prepared. Do not curse your training ground. Your obedience in secret is what authenticates your authority in public. But here, preparation is not only spiritual, it is practical. It does not become offensive. You must prepare your mind to think differently. You must rewire your thought patterns, because every new level of promise requires a higher level of thought. Scripture tells us, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This is not poetic. It is practical psychology. If your mind is still governed by scarcity, not become defensive, you will reject abundance. If your thoughts are still trapped in trauma, you will sabotage freedom. If your identity is still rooted in past failure, you will shrink in the face of opportunity. Before the promise transforms your life, it must first transform your mind. And only you can take authority over your thoughts. Preparation also demands discipline in your decisions. Offense of, you cannot sow inconsistency and reap destiny. Every action you take today is either constructing or corrupting your tomorrow. You must align your habits with your hope. What time do you wake up? What do you read? Who do you surround yourself with? These are not trivial details. They are the bricks of destiny. A man becomes what he consistently chooses. It does not, in God, will not elevate someone who refuses to master their daily life. There is a subtle danger in our generation. We confuse passion with preparation. We shout louder, cry longer, and declare boldly. But if there is no structure beneath the fire, it will burn out before it bears fruit. Fire must be contained in a vessel. Passion must be channeled into process. Otherwise, it becomes a fleeting emotion rather than a force of transformation. Do not mistake a spiritual high for spiritual maturity. Do not confuse momentum. True preparation builds consistency, and consistency attracts divine trust. And yes, participation requires courage, because preparation will often feel like isolation. Become the offense of. When you are truly preparing for promise, you will not always be celebrated. You may be misunderstood. You may be mocked. Because the world honors performance, not process. But God sees differently. He inspects the hidden places. He rewards the secret work. So while others rush to be seen, focused on being ready. Because when the hour of manifestation comes the offense of, it will not wait for you to prepare. It will only respond to those who already are. If you are truly serious about stepping into God's promise for your life, then you must be willing to face one brutal, soul-searching truth. The promise of God will require you to walk away from what is familiar. You cannot inherit the future while still clutching the past. You cannot embrace your calling while still worshiping your comfort. There is a sacred violence required in destiny, a holy audacity that demands you leave behind what feels safe in order to pursue what is sacred. It is a dangerous thing to romanticize where you've been. Many are trapped not by the enemy, but by nostalgia. They remember how things were, who they used to be with, what they used to do, and they remain loyal to a version of life that no longer aligns with where God is taking them. But let me remind you, the God who speaks in seasons will also move in seasons. And when the cloud moves, the camp must move. You cannot remain in old patterns when divine movement is calling you forward. What was once a blessing can become a burden if you refuse to release it when the time comes. Consider the story of Abraham. He was told, leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. God did not give him a map. God gave him a mandate. And the blessing was not in the familiarity of where he was. It was hidden in the obedience to step into the unknown. Destiny always requires detachment. You must detach from environments that confine your thinking. You must detach from relationships that limit your growth. You must detach from cycles of fear and regret. And you must do it even when you do not yet see the full picture of what's next. This is why so many people live unfulfilled, because the cost of the promise is too high. They want transformation, but they don't want transition. They want new fruit, but refuse to prune old branches. And yet, you cannot pour new wine into old wineskins. If you attempt to hold the future in the structure of your past, it will break you. It will spill. It will spoil. The vessel must be made new before the blessing is poured in. There is something deeply psychological about our attachment to the familiar. The mind finds safety in repetition. Even when the repetition is toxic, it gives us a false sense of control. This is why people stay in dead relationships, in broken systems, in failing careers. Because leaving would mean stepping into uncertainty, and the human mind fears the unknown. But faith, true faith, thrives in the unknown. It sees the darkness and walks anyway. It hears the silence and still believes. It recognizes the discomfort not as a threat, but as a signal that you have outgrown the space you are in. And yet, leaving the familiar is not always external. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you have to leave is yourself, the version of you that survived but is no longer fit to lead, the version of you that was shaped by trauma, by rejection, by failure. You must shed the skin of your old identity. You must break the inner agreements you made when you were wounded. That silent vow that said, I will never trust again. That quiet belief that whispered, I am not worthy. That lie that echoed, people like me don't succeed. Those beliefs are not part of your promise. They are part of your prison. When God called the Israelites out of Egypt, He delivered them in one night. But it took 40 years to get Egypt out of them. They were out physically, but they were still bound mentally. This is the tragedy of many believers today. They have left Egypt, but Egypt has not left them. They sing about freedom, but think like slaves. They dream about purpose, but cling to fear. And so the promise remains out of reach, not because God is unfaithful, but because their mindset is incompatible with their miracle. To step into God's promise, you must redefine your relationship with discomfort. Growth does not come wrapped in comfort. Every dimension of destiny has a cost. You may have to lose friendships. You may have to be misunderstood. You may have to walk alone. But do not confuse isolation with punishment. Sometimes isolation is preparation. Sometimes separation is divine strategy. God removes what you thought you needed to show you what you really have. He strips away the applause so you can learn how to stand in silence. Because if your identity is tied to people, then your faith is tied to approval. And that, my friends, is a fragile way to live. Let us not forget the story of Ruth. When her husband died, she had every reason to return to Moab, to what was familiar, to what made sense. But she looked at Naomi and said, where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. And with that one decision, she stepped into the bloodline of Jesus. Her breakthrough was not in comfort. It was in commitment. She left what was predictable to walk toward what was providential. Sometimes the greatest act of faith is not speaking in tongues or quoting scriptures. It is simply saying, I will go.